Hello folks, I'm Dan. Wanted to do a quick little video for you about cutting thicker aluminum with a router. Been some discussion offline here lately. Had some questions about how I'm cutting my heavier aluminum parts, and in this case I'm going to use my flap-around brackets as a example here. These are 90 thousandths aluminum, and I've already previously cut all mine, so I'm not going to actually run a router tonight to build these, but I want to show you what I use for templates and how I set up everything to cut these heavier pieces. Not a hard project at all, or not a hard process at all. It's something you can very easily do. Guys have talked about sending them out and having them cut by laser or water jet, whatever your choices may be, but they're really simple to do. As we know, I'm quite a fan of using router templates, and if you've watched many of my videos, well, you've seen me talk about router templates and use router templates quite a bit. I use my little homemade router table, and I use Porter Cable 690 routers. I've settled on the 690, which is their 1 3/4 horse router. Settled on them over the years because the first ones I bought were in a kit where you bought both a standard base and a plunge base and the router head itself. So you got a pretty good deal buying those at one point in time. So I've been through a couple of those now. I'm on my third or fourth router head now. So consequently, I've got, I think, 2 plunge bases, and I've got 3 or 4 standard router bases. One of them I've set up with just an acrylic base plate that I built that fits in my little router table. I've been cutting some particle board on this, so a little bit dusty, but just a standard Porter Cable base and acrylic that fits down into my router table. And I build these as I need. I've got a couple of different ones. Some I made out of hardboard for special applications, and 1 or 2 other acrylic bases that I made up for them. The 690 routers, like I say, that's what I settled on. I don't know that the Porter Cables are any better than the DeWalt's or the Bosch's. Got a competitive price point. They've worked well for me, and since I've kind of bought into the system and have so many accessories for the Porter Cable, that's what I'll stay with. So, and I'll put a link down in the description to all the goodies that I use for my setup. Aluminum can be cut very easily. Router templates for this. This is my router template for this, and I'll put some stills of this in there. This is a router template for those flap-around brackets. The flap-arounds themselves, when you originally make them, the bottom 2 holes are drilled afterwards to mount it to your wing, so you don't have those holes to reference. You do drill a 1/8 inch pilot hole in there, or a tooling hole, and later on that gets opened up to a 1/4 inch hole. So you've got that hole to use as a reference, and that's the way I set up my router templates. Is on this template, why it's got an 1/8 inch hole here. So what I do is I use this bottom flat edge. I make that a straight edge, whether I sand it into a straight edge or whatever the case may be, and then I cut out the outline on my bandsaw. I use Bow Lube as a lubricant on both the bandsaw and for the router itself, so they run a little bit cooler, and that works as a real good lubricant. So I'll put my oversized blank onto the template. It's got 2 just 1/4 inch dowels is all they are, that acts as a reference for the bottom edge of that. Once my rough cut template's set in place, then I can go back through and drill through the backside, and that gives me a pilot hole, or a tooling hole per se, where that belongs. Put an 1/8 inch pin in there, and that retains it there. And for the top, I just got another little piece that also acts as a little bit of a handle, which is why you've got the extra here too, as it gives you a little more to hold on to. And you can make these jigs as elaborate as you want to, but it's not necessary to get too excited with them. Once it's set in place with the pin in, that clamps it in place. I've got some sheetrock screws. I just screw it down so it pinches it in there, and your piece is in position. From there, all you've got to do is go to your router table. I use a bottom bearing bit for this particular template. A lot of the things that I use or a lot of the templates that I build will use a top bearing. So the bearing's on top, and it would ride against, essentially the top piece here is where it would ride. This is a bottom bearing, so it rides against the bottom of the template and routes the outer edge. Once that's done, you pop it out of the template and deburr the edges, and your parts are done. Quick, simple, and easy. Not a real hard process at all. Doesn't take any elaborate equipment. Doesn't take any more than what I use in the airplane factory anyway to build those parts. So it works really well. You can develop these templates any way you want. Like I say, you can make them as simple or as elaborate as you want. You could build a little bit longer base on this end to give you more of a handhold and more of a flat surface to route them on, but this is all that's necessary. It goes on the router table. Keep your fingers out of the way, and you don't have any problems at all. So that's the quick, simple tip. That's the quick, simple tip for the day. That's how I do my templates. Like I say, lubricant is bow lube, both on the bandsaw blade on my little benchtop bandsaw, and as a lube for the aluminum when I take it to the router table, and I just run it along the edge of the, if I'm doing the bandsaw, I'll lube the bandsaw blade usually. If I'm doing my router template, I'll run it across the rough sawn edge before I route it on there. That's all it takes to do them. So hopefully that'll answer questions for you. I did quite a bit on router templates when I built the wing ribs. I'll put a link to that video up above someplace so you can go and watch that if you haven't seen it. Okay, there's a little better view of the little 690 routers, 1 3/4 horse. Here's our little template. And it's just a simple template, as I said before. 1/4 inch dowels in it to hold the alignment hole across the bottom there. And our pieces fit right on there like that, cut oversized of course. Index pin goes right there. Bottom piece goes on, if we can get it aligned through the camera here. And our sheetrock screws hold it in place. We could get fancy, we could run a couple of 1/4 inch bolt holes through there, put a carriage bolt in the bottom or a countersink them from the bottom to hold a couple of bolts there in that flange on the bottom and bolt them down. Wouldn't have to worry about wearing out, which is probably why I've got 4 holes. I probably started out with 2 holes and stripped out 2 of them, or 1 of them, so I added a couple more holes to do it. But anyway, that gives you real nice parts. You know, I cut 8 of these parts. They're all exactly the same. Won't be any difference in one of them. They'll all be well within tolerance and just almost exact. So anyway, those are ready to mount on the other wing as soon as I get the skins in place on it. Here's our bottom bearing router bit. So this is well used. I need to replace a couple of these router bits as we start this build season. But anyway, that's what they are. So hopefully this is something you can use in your airplane build. I hope you find it useful. If you do, you might give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. And thanks for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it.